man who had the privilege of having the Lord's Ark sheltered by his family in the Old Testament times, but ended up having a tragic ending in the Ark touching hasty. This man was Uzzah. He was the son of Abinadab, precisely the man who hosted the Alliance Ark at his home shortly after the calamities that hit the Philistine. Well, what draws attention in the story of Uzzah, of course, is that God has hurt him. I know that saying that God hurt or killed someone may seem a strange statement to those who forget that God is the owner of life, and he gives it and takes it with good to understand, without having to give satisfaction to anyone. And that does not make God unfair or evil, quite the contrary. Stories like that of Uzzah are proof that God is fully just and holy, as he is also fully merciful, kind, and loving. One divine attribute definitely does not nullify the other. Even so, many people question the severity of God's judgment against Uzzah. Was the divine punishment disproportionate against him? Was it just touch the ark trying to hold it? Was it such a serious mistake? Also, why did Uzzah die by touching the ark if before him the Philistines also did the same, and the Bible does not speak of any Philistine being immediately killed when touching the ark? If you have any difficulty understanding this story, watch this video until the end, because you will know who Uzzah was in the Bible and understand why he was punished by God. As has been said, Uzzah was the son of a man named Abinadab. According to the biblical text, Uzzah also had two brothers, called Eleazar and Io. The latter was also present when the incident that cost the life of Uzzah occurred. Some scholars argue that perhaps Uzzah and Io were not specifically children of Abinadab, but their descendants, perhaps his grandchildren. Anyway, Uzzah and Io belonged to the house of Abinadab. But to better understand the history of Uzzah, we also need to go back a little more in biblical history. Even before the leadership period of the prophet Samuel, the Bible says that when the Israelites were defeated by the Philistines at the time of the deaths of the Ophim priests and Finns, children of the high priest Eli, the Ark of the Covenant was captured. The Philistines took the Ark to their cities, but were punished by the Lord. Then, terrified and could no longer stand the misfortunes that were falling on them, the Philistines understood that the covenant ark had to be returned to the Israelites. And it was in this context that the alliance ark ended up in Kiryat Jearim. The men of that place took the ark to the house of Abinadab and separated Eleazar, son of Abinadab, to be responsible for her. And after many years, the ark was in the house of Abinadab, was already reigning over the Israelites, decided to take the Lord's ark to Jerusalem, confirming the position of that city as the religious center of Israel. The problem is that the ark transport mission was a real disaster. The Bible says they put the ark in a new car, laid car, and Uzzah and Io were responsible for driving the wagon. At first, the ark transport was accompanied by a caravan that had a great party before the Lord, until something happened. When the caravan was coming to Nahum's era, it seems that the oxen stumbled or made some sudden movement that caused the ark to hang. And it was then that, hastily, Uzzah reached out to hold the ark, and the wrath of the Lord lit against him. In this way, the biblical text says that God wounded Uzzah and he died right there, next to the Ark of the Covenant. And because of this place became known as Perez, whose meaning refers to the eruption of God's wrath against Uzzah. This event made King David very shaken. He was even afraid of the Lord, and at that moment he gave up continuing the ark transport to Jerusalem. Then the ark was taken to the house of a man named Obed-Edom, where he remained for 3 months. But here comes a question. Why did Uzzah die when touching the ark of God? Well, the biblical text of the second book of Samuel, chapter 6. After Ark was in his house for so many years, Uzzah was reckless and eventually violated the sacred character of the ark, which represented the presence of God dwelling among his people. It turns out that they were carrying the ark completely inappropriately in the light of divine recommendations. According to the book of Numbers, chapter 4, we know that God had commanded that when the ark was transported, the Kohathites, who was the family of the Levites from which the priestly lineage was also separated, had to carry it on their shoulders separately. But at that time they were carrying the ark about an oxen car, something similar to what had been done by the Philistines when they captured the ark. That's right. The people of the covenant were treating the maximum representation of God's presence in the days of the Old Testament in the same way as pagan peoples treated it. But at this point, a lot of people do not understand why Uzzah died by touching the Ark of the Covenant, and it did not immediately happen to the Philistines who before him had captured the Ark. In fact, God had allowed the Ark to be carried by the Philistines as judgment against Israel. Moreover, God's purpose was an even greater manifestation of his power among foreign peoples. For during the time when the Ark stayed with the Philistines, they were punished with great calamities, and their main deity, the god Dagon, was humiliated when he has his head shattered before the Ark of the Lord. But in the case of Uzzah, it was different. The Ark had been in the care of his family for many years, and because of that, the most scholars understand that this was probably a family of Levites, and therefore it seems logical to assume that Uzzah was aware of God's ordinances about how the Ark of the Covenant had to be done. Then, when the moment had finally arrived when the Ark would be taken to Jerusalem, the place that would become the center of the hidden to God in Israel, those responsible for it ignored the Lord's order, tried to transport the Ark in their own way. Thus, in that context, the punishment about Say had a pedagogical character to show everyone that God's things could not be done anyway. Now I want to know in the comments if you already knew the story of Uzzah in the Bible.
You stayed until the end, and you know what that means? It means we're connected. So, comment your city, your country, check out the links in the description, and share this with someone who also understands the value of truly listening. Thank you, a big hug to all, and see you in the next video.